What's up, guys? This is Blue from Bacon Airsoft, and today we're going to be taking a look at the internals of an ICS CXP MARS, and this is the non-S3 version. The S3 version is the version that has the fancy electronic trigger unit. It's a little bit more expensive, but in my opinion, definitely worth it. So you can also consider this an internal review of all of the CXP proline editions, because we're going to go over what is different between the MARS and the standard CXPs, and then review the rest of it as just the regular CXP. So first of all, what's different about the MARS from the standard CXP? In the upper gearbox, the only thing that's actually going to be different that they have upgraded from the standard CXP is they have integrated a quick change spring system, which is an absolutely fantastic upgrade. It's something that I was definitely pushing for definitely hoping that ICS would do for the last couple of years. So it actually makes it so that the ICS upper gearbox, the quick change spring in an ICS M4, is actually faster than any other quick change system in any other M4, Airsoft M4 on the market. Because normally, even with a quick change spring system on an M4, you have to disassemble the entire gun and take the gearbox out in order to access the spring change. Whereas with an ICS M4, all you have to do is split the upper and lower and turn the spring guide a little bit, and it pops right out. You can slide a new spring, and you can literally do a spring change in like 15 to 20 seconds if you're quick. So it is going to have a metal ball bearing spring guide, so you never have to worry about it breaking. Everything else in the upper gearbox is the same as the standard CXPs. And the lower gearbox is going to be a little bit different in a couple of ways. Number one, the flat trigger. I actually am a really big fan of flat triggers. I prefer the ones that don't have the nub at the bottom, but this didn't bother me on this trigger nearly as much as I thought it would. It's at a nice downward angle, so it's not sharp, it's not interfering with your finger at all. So flat trigger is a nice little addition. And also a really big change is they integrated a 3034 based MOSFET into the wiring harness, which is a really big upgrade from the previous editions that didn't have a MOSFET at all. The S3 version has a fancy electronic trigger unit that has a lot of other benefits, but the 3034 base MOSFET is just going to protect your trigger contacts and slightly increase your trigger response, just because it basically digitizes the entire electrical aspect of the gun. So it's a really, really nice addition. Definitely, honestly, just these two changes with the quick change spring system and the 3034 MOSFET internally make the MARS worth the little bit of a price hike you're going to be paying over a standard CXP. Aside from that, the motor is exactly the same, and the inner barrel and hop-up chamber assembly are exactly the same as all the other CXPs. So the rest of this I'm just going to review as the regular CXP version. On a regular CXP, you're not going to have the quick change spring system. You might have a plastic or a metal spring guide, but you're actually going to have to take apart the upper gearbox to change the spring. Keeping in mind that's still a faster spring change than a standard M4 gearbox. So from the lower, the standard CXP is going to have just a regular curved trigger, so nothing particularly special there. But the gears are, honestly, in my opinion, probably the most important part of the internals, because the gears sort of drive everything, and if the gears are weak, then you might as well not even have an airsoft gun. The gears in this are extremely durable. I would put them probably at the top as far as stock guns go as for gear durability. E&L and Crytek gears are both extremely strong as well, so I haven't seen the science on any of those, but I've never broken a set of ICS gears personally. ICS gears, the way they manufacture them, they actually start out much larger than they are now, and they shrink them down, so they're a lot more durable, and the density is increased a lot. So extremely durable gears, 18-to-1 ratio. Of course, you're going to get standard version 2 trigger contacts that are protected by the MOSFET, and the wiring on this is 16 gauge, which is actually a really nice addition. Most standard airsoft guns come with 18 or 20 gauge wiring. Most of them are 18, but the smaller the gauge of wire, which, by the way, higher numbers means smaller gauge, the smaller gauge of wire is going to have more electrical resistance, so this is going to make it so that the electricity can just flow freely, and you're not going to have to worry about electrical inefficiency or anything else. So 16 gauge wire that has good insulation on it. Honestly, another really great aspect of the gun. The anti-reversal latch is going to be integrated into the safety, so whenever you turn the gun on safe, it trips the anti-reversal latch and allows the gun to, like everything inside the gun, to reset, allows the gears to spin back forward, and it takes the tension off of the spring. That's a nice feature as well, because if you leave your spring under tension for too long, then it can actually just weaken the spring and make it so that you don't get as high of a velocity reading from it. The shimming in ICS guns, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. The shimming in most ICS lower gearboxes is perfect, or at least very nearly perfect. In this ICS gearbox, I haven't changed the shimming at all, and the gears spin beautifully, no grinding or anything, and the play in the gears is very minimal. Like, there's less than 0.1 millimeters in the sector gear, probably about 0.1 millimeters in the spur, and the same as the sector gear in the bevel gear, so less than 0.1 millimeters. So as far as they're all shimmed to each other perfectly and shimmed to the gearbox perfectly. However, one thing that you might experience is the bevel to pinion gear contact being off. Now, the pinion gear is the gear on the motor, and it contacts the bevel gear right here. If the bevel gear is too low, which is oftentimes the situation with ICS rifles, you might hear to like a sort of a screeching or like a loud grinding noise. Now, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, because you're still getting full gear contact. It's not going to cause, like, it'll cause gear wear, but it's not going to break your gears if the bevel gear is shimmed too low. If it were shimmed too high, it would be a different story. But because it's shimmed too low, basically the thing you're worried about is the sound, how it sounds. You want it to sound crisp and nice. So if you have a gun where the bevel to pinion contact is off, it's going to be a little bit too tight. So feel free to take a couple of shims off of the top of the bevel gear right here and move them down to the bottom to raise the bevel gear up a little bit off of the pinion gear, and it should make it sound a good bit better. But other than that, the shimming on this was beautiful. And so don't feel like it's going to be an across-the-board thing, but every ICS gun that I've ever worked on, the shimming was at least good inside the gearbox, and it's sort of a hit or miss as to whether or not the bevel to pinion meshing is going to be good or not. Moving on to the upper portion of the gearbox. The upper portion of the gearbox is identical to the regular CXPs, aside from the spring guide, as I said before, and all of them are going to have this ported cylinder, and the port's in the exact same place on all of them. This is fine for all of the short-ish ICS rifles, so like shorter than 363 millimeters. One of the things that I was disappointed in was that it doesn't have a full cylinder for the MARS DMR, which has like a 455 millimeter inner barrel. You definitely need a full cylinder for that setup, especially running it as a DMR, running heavy ammo. You want to have the most air volume possible to push the heavy ammo out of that long barrel. So spring is going to be an M120 spring, and actually on this stock setup, it's pushing 450 feet per second with a .20 gram BB, which is excellent. Piston is also very interesting, and it's a good addition to the ICS rifle. First of all, the piston itself is made of polycarbonate. It's very durable, and it has 8 steel teeth, as you can see here, which increases the durability by a good bit. The back teeth are all kind of walled in right here. They have, like, I forget what it's called, but it increases the durability of those as well. It makes it so that they don't try and fold backwards. They're molded and they're stabilized in more than one place. The second tooth has been removed, not for angle of engagement correction, but to prevent premature engagement, and also when and if you correct angle of engagement, you don't have to remove that tooth. They've already done it for you. The piston head has nice wide ports, so you'll probably get good airflow through here for a nice consistent FPS. It's made of sort of like a polymer material, and don't be afraid, you don't need a metal piston head for this kind of setup. The polymer one is not going to break on you. I actually prefer polymer piston heads in a lot of setups. So piston assembly is great. The cylinder, as we said, is ported, which is good for the shorter variants. You will want to swap that out for the DMR. The cylinder head, the nozzle, and the tappet plate, they all work together very well. However, the air nozzle does not have an internal O-ring, which is a little bit disappointing. So you lose a little bit of air via the air nozzle, but because other than that, your inside the gearbox compression would be perfect. The only air that we're losing here is via the air nozzle, because if I take the air nozzle off, the compression is perfect. So if you get an air nozzle with an internal O-ring, you'll actually want to get like an SHS AK long nozzle. It used to be 21 millimeters or a little bit less instead of the 21.4 that standard M4 length air nozzles are. So O-ring air nozzle would definitely be a good addition. The cylinder head is nothing to write home about in and of itself. It just has a rubber bumper pad on the back, so the angle of engagement is not going to be perfect, but that's to be expected with really any stock gun. Crytek is the only one that I know of that corrects the angle of engagement out of the box, which is a nice addition. Probably something that ICS will be working into their guns in the very near future, to be perfectly honest. The gearbox shell is extremely durable. I've never broken an ICS gearbox shell, and I have run, actually, to tell you a quick story, to not to get too sidetracked, but I took an ICS gun. It was just the regular CXP, so it had all these internals. All I did was change out the motor to a JG Blue motor, which is 22 TPA, it's a little bit stronger than this motor, and an SHS Blue piston. I ran that setup on an SP160 spring. I was literally cranking out like almost 600 feet per second with this gun. SP160 spring, and none of the internals broke on like after 3,000 rounds. So absolutely fantastic durable internals. On most gearboxes, you would expect the gearbox shell to break for a full stroke single sector gear setup. I didn't even radius that gearbox, and it held up perfectly. So radiusing the gearbox is honestly kind of unnecessary. If you want to go ahead and do it, go for it. But it's not going to break. It's straight up just not going to break. So they did very well with the upper gearbox. Aside from like on the DMR, there should be full cylinder, and it would be nice if they went ahead and added the air seal or the O-ring air nozzle onto it. ICS actually manufactures an M4 O-ring air nozzle that works perfectly with this entire setup, so I would definitely recommend investing in one of those if you don't have access to like SHS parts, depending on where you live. The motor is the ICS Turbo 3000 motor. It's the same motor that comes in all the CXP lines. It is 19 turns per armature, so it has a good amount of torque, but it still, will produce a healthy rate of fire. It produces about 20 rounds a second on a stock ICS rifle with an 11.1 volt LiPo that's about 25C continuous discharge. And it has an O-type pinion gear. The pinion gear is really durable, never broken one. And the armature and the end bell are both very well manufactured. They're durable. There's no flaws anywhere that I can see. The one gripe I have about this is that the neo magnets in here are thinner than normal neo magnets that you could find in like most aftermarket motors. So it's fantastic for a stock motor. It outperforms any ferrous magnet motor by far, but it wouldn't be that hard to go ahead and put in the thicker neo magnets to make this perform a good bit better. So great stock motor, but not one that I would buy aftermarket. The inner barrel assembly and hop-up is the same as the CXPs. The inner barrel is aluminum, which isn't the best material to use for an inner barrel, but ICS has done very well with it in that the crown is perfect and the inside polish and consistency in it is great. So you're going to be getting good accuracy with just the stock setup. And if you were going to change anything about the inner barrel, if you weren't just going to replace it, I would wrap it in Teflon tape, just like one layer of Teflon tape in sort of a barbershop pole pattern all the way up to eliminate any barrel vibration between the inner and the outer barrel. The bucking is a sort of a medium density. It's not too hard, not too soft, but it is consistent. And the hop-up chamber, this is actually, in my opinion, one of the best hop-up chambers, one of the best rotary hop-up chambers on the market. Because most rotary hop-up chambers have the common issue of, because of the way the wheel interacts with the hop-up arm, it applies uneven pressure to the bucking. And ICS and Max, that's with 2X on the end, are the only two companies that make a rotary hop-up chamber that doesn't apply uneven pressure to the bucking. So they've done a fantastic job with this. If you have an ICS rifle with a metal hop-up chamber, absolutely do not ever replace it. It will serve you well for ages to come. So this has been Blue from Bacon Airsoft. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and I will see you all next time.